And the house will be fully occupiable at that point.
Okay, so your goal is you'll be in by June 1st, and then before you can move in, do you have to have it inspected?
I'm actually not sure if I need to have that inspected, that final inspection. This is being run through the construction arm of my own business, so it's a priority on everybody's calendar.
Okay.
And in the event that there were any delays, I would just stay here in Northport, and it would maybe be like a week or two more, but there's no gap in housing.
Okay, so your place in Northport, you had a lease through April, correct? And then are you doing month to month now?
I had a lease through April, and then we agreed to extend it for the month of May. And I'm agreed to, it turns into an Airbnb, like a short-term Airbnb for vacation in like mid-June.
Okay. So what is your rent right now for the month of May?
I paid $2,800 in May.
Okay.
It's a little bit, it was about $1,000 more than what I paid in previous months, just because it's a nicer season here.
Okay. And if you have to go into June, what's going to be the arrangement for paying for that then?
I actually haven't crossed that because I don't anticipate that happening.
Okay. Did you say she already has it rented out starting mid-June?
I don't know the answer to that, when it's being occupied again.
Okay. Okay. But she generally, is that what you said? She generally starts renting it as an Airbnb mid-June?
This is her first year owning this home. She bought it in September, so she's kind of playing it by ear to herself.
Okay.
But I don't know.
Okay. I'm gonna have you look at Ishwarya, and I know this comes across harder to see, but these are some pictures that Andrew, I believe, took of the home when he was there, gosh, in February. Is that when he last visited?
I don't know when he took, yeah, I assume so, because he was here January 29th through February 7th, I think. So at some point he was in that on the property taking photos and videos, presumably for this.
Okay. And he was staying in your home for those days and you were out in Pasadena, correct?
He was staying in Northport, not in this home that you're looking at.
Okay. Okay. So do you recognize this room?
Yeah, that's actually part of the new part of the new storage portion of the house. I have an exterior wall that was framed in. So that's not part of the house anymore, of the living spaces. And that in January, when these photos were taken, no one was living there. And Andrew and I bought this house together. We lived in it together until he moved out on July 9th to move to California permanently. So these photos and specifically, like I had moved out of the house, I had moved out in October or November. I don't know. Yeah.
And then is this the dishwasher? Like, was it just kind of a rolling dishwasher that you put in place? What room is this?
That was our makeshift kitchen for the remodel we never did.
Okay. And is this the room that will be the kitchen now?
No.
Okay. Was this the laundry room?
Nope. That was our kitchen.
Oh, okay. Literally the kitchen. Okay. And what's going to happen with that kitchen room?
That's all part of the storage unit.
Okay.
Which is a legally defined space that the permit building has issued a permit for.
Okay. And then this is, I think this, I don't know, is this kind of like a big general room? And I think it shows that you had some people working.
My
in your
business,
space.
yeah, my business rented the space. Sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. No, you can answer. You tell me. So it looks like it's a table with some workman stuff going on. Would you
Yeah.
agree? Okay. So they were occupying that. Are they still there right now?
They're using it to build things for my new remodel.
Okay.
So, but they'll be out. So, we used it as a cabinet making space for a client, the Chatfields, who I gave you their name in Leland,
Okay.
modeled their kitchen, and everything was fabricated at my house.
Okay. Okay. And then here's the laundry room.
Yep.
Was this the makeshift kitchen?
Yeah, unfortunately.
Okay. And again, you said that's not part of the living space anymore then?
Correct.
Okay.
That's a storage room.
Okay. Again, that won't be part of the living space?
That's actually a den, and that space is also being remodeled, just to the extent that I'm having some flooring put in, and
Okay.
all of that stuff in there has been moved to other places. The house is actually totally different now because Tracy, who testified as Birdie's nanny, does a lot of personal assisting for me, and she helped clean out the house, and she cleaned out the entire kitchen that we just viewed and
Okay.
helped put everything away.
Okay. And then this looks like a bedroom. Is this the master bedroom? And it looks like there's like an air mattress in the corner there.
Yeah, Andrew and I, when I wanted him to move out, instead he put a twin bed in that room.
Okay.
And Birdie slept on an air mattress, and we all slept together in that room when we were not married or separated or whatever.
Okay.
Yeah, I slept in the big bed.
Okay.
That's Leo's room,
Okay.
and that's Josephine's room.
Okay.
Those rooms are currently being painted as we speak.
Okay. Okay. So I would ask, I think the court has a better copy that they can view. And I think Melissa, you have a better photo copy. It just came through on the scan from me. But I would ask that exhibit E in its entirety be admitted, and it's just those pictures we just scrolled through.
No objection.
Okay.
Admitted.
Thank you. So your position is that the home looks very different than it looks now, correct?
Yes, and I would be happy to submit photos.
Okay.
It's also it's currently a construction site. So, my business is being paid to put it back together in a way that will be suitable for the building department. The building department is not concerned with paint color and,
Yeah. No, those are superficial. So here's my question to you, Ishwarya. This looks like a text exchange between you and Andrew on September 28th. I think it was moving day. So I think I can see from your text that you both were acknowledging it was an emotional day. Do you recall this?
Ms.
text?
Belden, you have just your list up. We're not seeing what you're looking at.
Oh, how'd I do that? Okay, here, hold on. Let me go to
You might have to stop the share, then
restart it.
Start.
Okay, let me restart it. Hmm. Now can you see it?
yes.
yes.
Okay. Do you recall this text exchange, Ishwarya? And I know it's kind of, I had to get real close to the computer to read it.
I definitely can confirm it if we want to enter it.
Okay. I will have to submit this to the court. I don't believe I've entered it yet, or if it is somewhere, it's in one of these mass piles of things that I found this separately. But what I liked from it, I guess Melissa and Referee Hagan, what I wanted to get from that, I wanted to use it for context because I noticed that Ishwarya kind of in the second column, I see you texted Andrew and you said our belongings don't belong in this house. Can you explain what you meant by that? And this was, and can you clarify that this was the day that this is the day you were packing up the Leland home?
Yeah, Andrew did not prioritize moving all the furniture, including our children's beds, to Pasadena. So they were there since August 9th, and here we are September 28th, and I'm paying movers to put everything on a truck. I spent $700 and something like that. I actually am not sure what I mean by our belongings don't belong in this house. I would maybe say that I was looking forward to seeing my children the following day in California. And at that point, I was very much actively looking for a rental in Pasadena so that I could be near them. And I was very low on money, and I had to pay movers to put everything on the truck. Andrew paid for the actual truck. And it was just a really stressful time. And I was trying to also confirm a project in Leland so that I could pay for things. I don't really know.
You don't know what you meant by that. Okay, so I guess my next question would be, right below that, I'm sorry, you said, I love the property and the chicken coop, but the house itself has got to go. It's had its time and now it needs to go down for demo.
Mhm.
And then I think the next line that you put was like, there will be a demo party with spray cans of paint. So your initial plans when you bought that home was that it was going to be demolished?
No, when we bought the home, we were going to remodel it entirely. And then portions of the house were demoed, like those images you sent us from the kitchen and whatnot. We realized there were like portions of the house that just really were gross and needed to go. And over time, I started to really desire, or I still kind of would love to just like build a house on the property. It's beautiful. But part of my evolution in the last 6 to 8, 10 months to a year has been facing financial realities. So when I send this text on September 28th, I'm still actively trying to move to Pasadena, pay for private school, work in Leland, fly back and forth, and also thinking, just trying to grapple with all that was going on. And so this text exchange is actually a good example of how much I've had to grow and learn about financial management. Since I now have a construction arm of my business, I have contractors who are skilled builders and carpenters who have helped me reshape my plans to preserve and remodel portions of the house that are still nice and savable, and let go of the other portions and turn them into storage until maybe sometime in the future when I make different plans and am more financially, my business is more established.
Okay. So I'm trying to, in my head, I'm trying to visualize. So you're going to kind of have two parts to the home, if I understand correctly. There's going to be the living part, and then you're going to have a second part that's kind of cordoned off to be a storage part. But is it accessible from the living part, or do you have to go outside to access it? How does that work?
It has been framed in, which means there's an exterior wall being built with an exterior door. And so it's basically like if you were in your kitchen and you had a door out to your garage, there is a wall there and you step down into an unfinished garage space.
Okay.
So it is attached, but it is separate.
Okay. 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 And again, you are working with the county to get the permits and everything squared away for that, your planned move date of the end of this month.
Correct.
Okay. Your Honor, I have no further questions. Thank you,
Thank you.
Ashwarya.
Thank you.
Ms. Whitman, do you have any redirect?
I do, Your Honor. Ms. Nakala, would you agree that the terms of the September proposed consent judgment of divorce were financially illogical?
Yes.
And why were they financially illogical and unworkable, in your opinion?
My business is here in Leland and it requires my physical presence. And so it does not make any sense that the kids are then in a place that's not even a drive away. That's like a full day of airline travel, which requires thousands of dollars each time. And paying for private school, but not being able to live near them in any kind of any kind of reasonable manner. I mean, even the parenting split in that custody agreement is a 3-2 split, which is obviously illogical if I'm flying back and forth. And, you know, it just paying for 2 private school tuitions that totaled like $50,000, between $45,000 and $50,000. Andrew only had to pay Birdie's tuition, which was closer to $17,000 or $16,000, and have a rental home there while also having my home here, flying back and forth. It just didn't make any sense.
Can you explain why you agreed to it at that time?
At the time, it was part of first of all, I signed that agreement on June 17th after 2 years of horrendous behavior and divorce negotiations that went nowhere. I was completely running on fumes by that point, and I just needed to end the fighting and the constant going round and round and round. And really the only thing that Andrew would agree to was moving back to California. I know that there are many emails that suggest that he was open to other places because he has a remote job. But in reality, he was never serious, nor did he make any actual serious. I mean, he was visited southern, like the Detroit area, but he only wanted to live in LA. And at the end of the day, I was just so exhausted by everything. And there's this part of just a long-term pattern and dynamic between us where Andrew really gets what Andrew wants. And that has played out year after year after year after year. And a lot of it was financially catastrophic. And you know, alongside signing some.
Stop you. What was financially catastrophic?
I mean, Andrew wanted to be a professional Hollywood writer. And so he didn't really have any full-time jobs, and he always contracted. He is a professional writer for corporate companies, and he works remotely. And what that did was create an enormously unstable life for us, especially when we were in California. There was never a single year between the year 2012 and 2020 when we had a full year of continuous health coverage. The first year that we had continuous health coverage was in 2020 when we were in Michigan and we had more money because the cost of living is way more affordable. We had, giant lapses in health insurance, giant medical bills that went unpaid. We had to move around different rental homes. Our rent was late regularly. 2 cars were repossessed over those years. And, we almost lost our home in Pasadena. We went through a loan modification. And I know that, in his discovery responses, the response is just that Aishwarya did not work to help support the family. And I did work. I did have jobs. It was always very hard in California because of the commuting. Andrew himself at many times commuted for hours a day, and I was the primary caregiver for our children. And so when he was commuting or busy with work or chasing down, one screenplay idea or another, he went to UCLA that his mother paid for his screenwriting program there. It was chaos, total chaos. And I didn't realize what it meant to be financially responsible until Andrew moved to California this past fall. I now get bills in the mail and I pay them. I had to learn about accounting basics. I had to change it was trial by fire. Like all the plane tickets that I bought, they add up. And when I signed that agreement, I had this is my fault too, but it's like, I participated in all this because really I lived in service to Andrew's ambition to live in California and become a famous writer, which
And-
continues to this day.
When you moved to Northern Michigan in 2020, it was July of 2020, correct? I believe you testified that you were hopeful, and you and your husband were both hopeful that your marriage would improve as you lived in Northern Michigan with less financial stress, correct?
Yes,
But in fact, your marriage did not improve, correct?
correct.
And you've mentioned before being the target of a variety of emotional and verbal abuse by your husband. Is that accurate?
Yes.
And can you describe that for us during the period of when you moved to Leland in July of 2020 until he left in California in July of 2022?
After we moved to Leland, I think we both had high hopes that our life would just be different. And we bought this fixer-upper and it was going to be fun. And instead it was like, it was very expensive to work on the house. And that was, hard. And Andrew was working at home. It was COVID. All our kids were home. And he worked in a guest house remotely. And he just was so angry, and he was going through this thing with his own family of origin. He had to cut off contact with his mom, and it just turned into, I would say, if not daily, weekly emotional stress, pain, batterings, screaming, yelling, controlling behaviors, everything. He hated everything about living in Northern Michigan. He hated it. And he took it all out on me. He would yell at me. And one occasion, like that I can really specifically recall, like, we both yelled at each other at times, but like, he's way bigger than me. And it just was so frequent, the fighting, and his screaming was out of control. And one point I say to his therapist, it's in a therapist note, and I say, like, Andrew's anger is explosive and ugly. Birdie was in the guest house where Andrew worked with me one day, and our cleaners were in the house, and Andrew lost his temper and started screaming violently at me in front of our daughter, which happened repeatedly. And she was like 3 years old, 2 years old. And she started crying, and she just kind of froze and didn't know which parent to run to. And then she ran over to me and we left. And, after things like that, he would feel bad and he would apologize, and we'd go for a car ride and drive to Nine Bean Rose and get coffee or whatever. And it was like, it was out of control. And we tried to like repair things. Like I got a job at the school because I couldn't be at home anymore. It was so toxic. And I hired a babysitter for Birdie, even though I was making less at the school, and Andrew was making a fair amount of money, and we had some extra money. But I started working at the school to escape him, really. And then, we tried to repair things. We went on a family vacation, and then we went to New York for our 14th wedding anniversary. And I thought we were going to be better. And like, we went to New York, and I was like, okay, let's start over. And we came back, and within a week, it was like he was angry and being awful. He hated all my friendships in Leelanau. And then finally in July of 2021, he agreed to separate because he was out of control. And there was a fight at a restaurant in the Riverside Inn. And, you know, he got on a plane and went to California, and I filed for divorce in August.
Are you aware of any mental health diagnoses of your husband that could explain his behavior?
In, I think, January of 2022 or 2021, I'm sorry, after we moved there, he began seeing a therapist who diagnosed him in January with complex post-traumatic stress disorder due to his own childhood abuse, which is terrible. Terrible being for him, I mean.
I'm gonna give 1 second. Hold on a minute. I've got to work through here and get into what I need. Can everybody see this?
Yes.
Ms. Nucala, do you recognize this email?
Yes,
And it might have been one of the ones that Ms. Belden actually showed us a little bit earlier. It's dated July 27th, 2021.
yes,
And it's written from Mr. Llewellyn to you, correct?
correct.
But it's actually not addressed to you, is it?
No.
But he sent it to you, correct?
Andrew typically shared all of his communications with his mother at this point to me first.
And did you in fact receive this email on this date?
Yes.
And you've highlighted certain things here that he wrote to you. He states that he has discovered that this destruction began far before I got married. I am in treatment for a condition called complex post-traumatic stress disorder, which is a form of PTSD resulting from extreme emotional abuse and neglect in one's childhood. Is that consistent with what your understanding is of his diagnosis?
Yes,
And he also writes in this letter, through my therapy and recovery, I have begun to understand that the factors that led to my CPTSD are woven into the very fabric of our family. And by that, I believe he means the family of origin. I demonstrate symptoms of this diagnosis. Do you see that?
yes,
So in this letter that he wrote to his mother, he acknowledges this diagnosis and that it's played a role in his life even prior to your marriage, correct?
correct.
Why do you know why he sent you this letter or this email addressed to his mother?
I just played an active daily role in Andrew's family disaster. And it was part of the reason why I sought a divorce. And he always, even when I would say, please stop writing to me about this, like I can't be involved with this horrendous situation. He just couldn't respect my need to not be. He just needed me to validate everything to this day.
So I think you said that was in Ms. Belden's packet, but you didn't say whether it was admitted, and I didn't hear anyone ask if it was admitted. You read out of it and it's highlighted, but
I was going to get it admitted through Mr. Llewellyn unless I can offer it as an exhibit if there's no objection.
I would like you to go through Andrew on that, with Mr. Llewellyn on that one, because I don't know enough about that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Exhibit 21 that we've submitted, Ms. Nucala. Is this an email from Mr. Llewellyn to you?
Yes,
And it's dated November 16th, 2021 at 10:13 a.m. Is this a true and accurate representation of what he sent you on that day at that time?
yes,
And there's a portion of this that was highlighted for the purposes of this hearing. he wrote to you, I have also told you that my anger and emotions the first year we lived here were out of control. I acknowledged that my behavior was wrong and I have apologized to you. My anger in our marriage toward you has always been a problem.
Is
And I
this
have-
admitted? I hate to keep harping on this, but I really
Okay.
don't like when things are read onto the record before they're admitted. I don't think that it's not just me being particular. I think that
No, I
that's what
understand,
the
Your Honor.
evidence require, rules of evidence require.
Ms. Nucala, you identified this as a true and correct copy of what you received from Mr. Llewellyn on November 16th, 2021.
Yes,
And I'll scroll to the bottom. There's additional communications between you on the same day. Are those both of your email addresses?
yes,
And that's your response, correct?
yes,
And that's the end of the document. I move for this to be entered as Exhibit 21.
No objection.
Thank you for that. Exhibit 21 is admitted.
The highlighted portion here, Ms. Nucala, I'll go ahead and state again. I have also told you that my anger and emotions the first year we lived here were out of control. I acknowledged that my behavior was wrong and I have apologized to you. My anger in our marriage toward you has always been a problem, and I am acknowledging that and trying to take steps to manage it better. Did he write that to you?
yes,
Do you believe that that is an accurate characterization of what had been going on in your marriage?
yes,
And did you attend therapy with him to try to address those anger issues?
yes.
And was it successful?
No, I would say no. Not due to, it was not due to couples therapy.
Earlier, Ms. Belden was asking you about certain documents that seem to indicate that perhaps you too have an anger problem. Do you believe that to be accurate?
No.
Why not?
Anytime I stepped out of line, it was like I was in the wrong. Like, for example, in this email, Andrew writes to me because I went to the store and I bought him protein powder, which was a little bit of an annoying thing to do because he had this obsessive workout thing going on, and I didn't want to, whatever. And this email that he sends to me is because I got mad at him about buying him something at the store. And like, if I said anything to him about anything that was small or maybe larger, it was like I had an anger problem. I am 5 feet 1 inches tall. Andrew's 6 feet tall. I do not scream violently. I do not throw things at him. I've never thrown anything at him. I do not scream uncontrollably and violently and threaten his physical being. I've never done that. And so it's just not comparable. And honestly, he just needs complete and utter, he needs for me to be a doormat, which is what I was for our entire marriage. And when I started to stand up for myself, when we moved to Leelanau and I made a lot of wonderful friends and took my children to play with those kids, it was like I was partying all the time. We were in Leland on COVID. There was nothing open. I was just at other people's houses with our kids hanging out. He did not like any of my friendships. It was just this horrible double standard that I was like not allowed to have any freedom.
What do you make of that now that you've gotten a little bit of distance from it?
I think it's very dysfunctional and sad, and not the way you treat someone you love.
Were you financially able to leave Mr. Llewellyn during the first year that you and he lived in Leland?
No, I did not have a job until I started working at the school as a substitute teacher for $100 a day in April of 2021.
Did you have your own debit card?
No,
Did you have your own credit card?
no.
Did you have your own bank account?
We had a joint account. I did not have my own personal account.
And how did Mr. Llewellyn react to you spending money? Did he allow you financial autonomy?
I was allowed to spend money at the grocery store, like stuff for the kids, stuff for the kids being like, I ran the household to the sense that like I bought all the groceries and gas and like, cleaning supplies at Target or whatever. But I just wasn't like, I didn't have any, like, I never bought anything for myself until we moved to Leelanau and we had more money. But like, for example, like right before we moved to Leelanau from Pasadena, like I was like, I'd really like to buy some new clothes. And he like checked the shopping cart. I had to like approve it with him before I was allowed to buy these like clothes. And they were like $200, and it's just no way to live. And I just didn't know that.
You touched on this briefly, but how did Mr. Llewellyn react to the positive friendships you formed with people in the Leland community who also had young children?
He was very angry and disdainful about them. He participated in socializing with us to some extent, but and I think he really liked everybody when we first moved there, and he was welcomed, just like it's a very welcoming community. And then over time, like as our troubles were increasingly difficult, I sought refuge with my other girlfriends who had children my age. And, as a way of just like connecting and having support and love in my life. And, at one point in March of 2021, there was a note in Andrew's therapist note saying that these relationships were like family to me. And the following year, there was a note almost exactly a year to the date saying Andrew is having difficulty extricating Aishwarya from her social support up north. It was an active aspect of our divorce proceedings that I did not know about. Andrew had a therapist who regularly counseled him on how to get me out of northern Michigan because it didn't work for Andrew. I wasn't a doormat. And once I started to work, I got that design project we already talked about. It became worse. And he said to me, I'm going
to ask you I'm going to break this up a little bit. When did you get the design project, the sort of magical one that you mentioned earlier?
I got it in October of 2021.
And you described how it came to be, but what was Mr. Llewellyn's reaction when that magical opportunity arose?
Well, he didn't say this initially, but later on he said to me that when the realtor, John Watkins, who connected me to the design clients, had emailed Andrew first and said, is it okay if I contact Aishwarya about this design project? And Andrew said to me, I thought about about saying no to him. And so you should really be thanking me for letting you have that project, or something saying like I got that because he said yes to the realtor to contact me. And then once I started earning significant amounts of money in a personal business, and I think actually at that point I only had a personal account, he said to me repeatedly that he was jealous and resentful of the money that I was making, because it would have been nice if I had made that when we lived in California and when we were married. But since we were getting divorced, he was angry that I had this kind of income coming in and it wasn't going to be part of his life in the future.
Did that make you feel supported in your new endeavor?
No.
Did it surprise you? Did that reaction surprise you?
Yes.
Why did it surprise you?
Because I thought Andrew loved me.
What do you mean by that?
I cheered for Andrew in our entire marriage, and I still do. I want his dreams to become a professional creative writer to come true for him. When my dreams started to come true, he was awful about it. Resentful, angry, complaining about me, working a lot, construing it that I was leaving the kids all the time. I was a working mom all of a sudden. And he works remotely, so he was at home all the time. He had to help more, and he hated that too.
The materials that Ms. Belden showed us and went over with you included a number of apologies by Mr. Llewellyn for his behavior toward you and back and forths about that. Was that a familiar pattern in your experience?
Yeah, I mean, I think like it's just like something would happen, it would be terrible, and either we would never talk about it or, he would apologize. And I think it's like in our marriage, like I really played the role of peacekeeper, like whether it was, just saying like, okay, we're going to get through this. I will say there were times where I was just like really angry and I just didn't want to talk about it. But he looked to me for constant validation, like the email to his mother, like, why am I getting that? At that point he was in Pasadena and we were separated. But it was just this constant need for me to tell him that things were okay. And he would do that using apologies and placating.
And how would you typically react to it?
I feel that I think that I reacted usually by saying, okay, it's okay. Okay, it's okay. But once we lived in Leelanau, it wasn't really okay with me because I had friendships and I had friends just say to me, like, what is going on over there? Like, he's so controlling and he's like this and that. And I would defend him. But over time, once I started working and having more time out in the world, I started to really see that behavior was not okay. And to this day, I'm still learning.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. When you lived to clarify, how long did you and Mr. Llewellyn live in California together?
From 2011 to 2020, so 9-ish years, 9
And
plus.
during that period of time, did you feel isolated?
Absolutely. I had to this day, like I can count 2 friends from California. And, I have a difficult relationship with my family, but I never once visited my family in New York. I never once flew to New York. The only time I got on a plane when I lived in California, aside from one occasion, I went to San Francisco. I went to a wedding once in Pennsylvania. And other than that, every single plane flight that I got on in those 9+ years was to Northern Michigan or Ann Arbor to see Andrew's family, to spend time with his family, to be around his family. And everything was about Andrew and his family. And they were abusive and it was awful. And even when I said to him, I don't want to be around your family anymore, he said to me, that's just what you do, Aishwarya. You just have to deal with it. It didn't matter.
At some point, Mr. Llewellyn decided he wanted nothing to do with his family anymore either, correct?
Correct.
And that was in part the letter that he wrote to his mother, correct?
Correct.
Would you say that you have become a lot more independent since you moved to Northern Michigan?
Absolutely. Yes. Thankfully.
Would you agree with me that the more independent you became, the more conflict arose in your marriage to Mr. Llewellyn?
Yes.
At the end of this long-term divorce negotiation, now I understand it's sort of still going on, but at least in the spring of 2022, the materials that Attorney Belden had showed you indicated that you did have significant reservations about a move back to California. Is that true?
Yes.
And you did in fact have those reservations?
Yes.
And you expressed those reservations to Mr. Llewellyn, correct?
Correct.
On multiple occasions, true?
Yes.
And he responded, according to those materials that we were shown, that he was willing to consider other options. Did you see that?
Yes.
And My question is, given that you expressed those reservations and he at least wrote that he was willing to consider other options, why did you proceed forward in August with the quasi move to California?
Despite what he wrote, he said to me, there was actually an email that was entered on July 18th, and then the next correspondence that was entered was on July 25th. In that week, clearly, I had had a conversation with him, which I can't pinpoint specifically when it was in that week, where he just made it clear that this was done and I had to do it. And I did not seek out the appropriate resources legally to know that I still didn't have to do it. I didn't know that the custody order was not set in stone. I didn't know that I didn't need to take the kids. This is just part of a remnant of our marriage. I listened to him and I really shouldn't have. It was a huge mistake. And meanwhile, all these emails that have been entered about him saying, I'm open to change and I want to change and I understand your feelings. There are therapy notes that align almost exactly within days of those emails to me, where his therapist says, you need to validate her feelings, but make sure you don't touch that divorce agreement. It is done. And his therapist encourages him to seek out legal resources, to call his attorney and make sure that what I am saying.
I'm gonna object to that right now because that hasn't been admitted and argue hearsay.
Okay.
Ms. Nucala, did you have your own lawyer in the summer of 2022?
No.
And you had a lawyer for the collaborative process, correct?
Yes, I had Gary Gardner.
And then Mr. Gardner advised you that he couldn't represent you after the collaborative process terminated, correct?
Correct.
And are you aware that that's just part of the collaborative process, that when that ends, neither one of those lawyers can represent either one of you? Is that correct?
I know that now.
And did Mr. Llewellyn have a lawyer?
Yes.
And who was that?
It was a woman named Melissa Umulis.
And did he offer to facilitate you getting your own lawyer?
No.
Did he offer to have meetings with Ms. Umulis where you could answer questions or ask questions, excuse me?
No.
And at some point you indeed did secure your own representation, correct?
Correct.
And that was on or about October 28th, 2022. Is that accurate?
Yes.
And how did Mr. Llewellyn react toward you when you finally secured your own independent counsel?
He was A, very surprised, and B, he was bullying and angry and wanted to know why I had done that and what was I trying to do. And, we were at a cafe, it was November 2nd. And
A cafe where, Ms. Nucala?
we were in Pasadena. I was in California at the time. And he had emailed me saying that the final divorce judgment was being entered the following day and that I did not need to be there because it was some kind of special hearing where I didn't have to be there. And I panicked and I called you and you said, okay, let's talk about this. And then Andrew said, I want to meet you. And so we were at this cafe in Pasadena and we were sitting outside and he just was bullying me across the table. And in retrospect, I see that as bullying. And in the moment I was afraid.
Afraid of what?
His anger, and just saying to me, what are you trying to do? Why'd you hire an attorney? Are you trying to move the kids back to Michigan? What are you trying to do? It's all said and done, and he was just saying it repeatedly. And then, after and then his attorney refused to adjourn the hearing the following day. And we had to kind of, and then Judge Kromkowski said that I could file something. And I filed on November 9th. And then on November 11th, Andrew wanted to talk again. And I was still in California. not working and broke. And, I met him at a cafe and he bought me a coffee. It was nice. And we sat down and he just was like, what are you trying to do? Why are you doing this? And by this point, I was just said to him, you should see if the Taliban is hiring, you would fit right in, which is not a nice thing to say. And he said, shut your effing mouth. And he started yelling at me, shut your effing mouth on this cafe sidewalk. And people were looking at us and we had to walk away from each other. And then we did not exchange a verbal word until probably just before the new year at the end of December, because we couldn't speak to each other anymore. Because I felt protected once I hired an attorney, and he was very angry about it. And at one point on November 18th, he sent me an email that said, basically that I had been planning to take the kids for the holidays to Michigan because I don't have a place there in California. And he writes in an email, it's Exhibit 65, that he says, well, we can just look at it.
Hold on one second. This one is one of the ones that's been a little buggy. Let's all keep our fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you recognize this email?
Yes.
It's dated November 8th, 2022, and that's his email and yours, Ms. Nucala?
Correct.
And it was sent from him to you at 6:30 p.m. on that day. Does it appear to be accurate?
Yes.
Is that actually what you received?
Yes.
Move for this to be entered as Exhibit 65.
I'm just looking at it quickly. No objection.
Admitted. Thank you.
Go ahead, Ms. Nucala.
Should I just read the highlighted portion?
When I'm pulling it up, just to make this flow, there are certain things highlighted here. And this is what he wrote to you on that day. What do you believe is important about this email?
He acknowledges that I have tried to set out the divorce judgment. He writes, we have each carried out all elements of the divorce judgment related to our kids. Me getting a residence here, moving the kids here, enrolling them in school and moving their possessions here. I did agree for the kids to go to Michigan for the holidays. However, I need to make 2 points about it. First, it was before you hired an attorney to contest our divorce judgment. And then he goes on to still propose that they can be here with me. But again, this is part of that larger pattern of, I will bully you. I'm going to say you can do this, but let me make sure you know that I'm not okay with it, or that I'm going to intimidate you first. And this was the pattern in our marriage. I want what I want. And when you step out of line, you will know how I feel about it.
When he says first, it was before you hired an attorney to contest our divorce judgment, that's when he had agreed to allow the kids to come. How did you interpret that?
I think I felt like I had a real problem on my hands because I didn't know. I was really just, I just was like, does this mean I can't take them? I think I went ahead and got tickets anyway. My friend Charlie bought them. And, I just realized like, it just wasn't going to be like, yeah, you got the kids for the holidays in Michigan. Like the way I thought all this was going to be. Like, yeah, you can take the kids. Yeah, can you pick them up after school? Sure, I'm busy. Okay, whatever. And we could co-parent. This is the opposite of what I had wanted in any of this. And it's because I was challenging him.
Was that unusual?
It was until we moved to Leelanau.
Do you recognize this email?
Yes.
It's dated November 17th, 2022. It's from him to you. Is that your email address?
Yes.
Is that his email address?
Yes.
Did you receive this email?
Yes.
Move for this to be entered as Exhibit 66.
Yeah, can I just read it real quickly?
Oh, of course.
Okay. Yeah, no objection.
Thank you, it's submitted.
Ms. Nukala, could you read the highlighted portion, please?
As I wrote to you yesterday, I'm considering agreeing having Leo and Bertie return to Michigan in January. I am not committing to this. I'm simply considering it. I need to think a lot about it and I need to consider the various factors. I understand the financial and logistical challenges of our divorce judgment has presented, and I am open to resolving them.
Have you been able to resolve the financial and logistical challenges as written in the proposed judgment since this date?
No, and we are here, and Andrew's position is that this divorce judgment needs to be entered as is. And he does not care about the financial and logistical challenges, even though he says he does in this email, which is part of the larger pattern of writing one thing to placate me. And then his actions do something totally different. And he also recognizes that I think at this point, Leo's school said that his tuition was behind and I couldn't afford to pay it. You know, so his school enrollment was in trouble. And, you know, Andrew was busy with his social life, and Bertie was 4 at the time and he needed childcare. And it's not convenient to have a 4-year-old if you're trying to, like, you know, socialize.
What were your concerns about Leo in the fall of 2022?
Oh my God. It was to say that it was a terrible time for poor Leo. He was in Pasadena. I was separated from him and he was really struggling. At one point, Andrew knew I won't even go, but there is documented evidence that Andrew said that Leo was depressed on October 6th. And over the course of October, instead of, Andrew also earned in the month of October $22,000, over $22,000 in cash deposits into our joint bank account. And he did not hire a therapist. He did not call a therapist. He did not sign Leo up for any activities. He only hired a babysitter on 2 occasions so he could go on overnight trips. He did not take care of our children. They did not have activities, and it was, our son was suffering and Andrew was absent, and he spent lavishly on himself. Like, I think close to $6,000 in the month of October alone. The kids never, like, you know, it was in a joint account. I didn't touch it. I needed money for food in Leelanau, and I didn't know what to do. And we had like communications with Leo's counselors. You know, on one occasion, like Josephine, I learned, I'll just say that Andrew had been gone out of the house between October 8th and October 21st on 10 occasions at night. And he would tell the kids, he would help Bertie get to bed. And then he would tell the kids that he was going out, and then he wouldn't come home until they were all asleep. And it happened he read out 10 nights. When you look at the bank statements, it looks like more than 10 nights. And he does all these actions are knowing that Leo is depressed. And our relationship, my communication with Andrew just totally fell apart. You know, there are text messages that were entered during our presentation where he just says, like, I'm not talking to you about any of this. If you're concerned, you just have to come here. And I did.
And you did in fact come there, correct?
He did. I got there on a plane on standby on October 27th. And the next day on October 28th, I took Josephine and Leo, my 2 older children, to see a therapist who I had arranged for, even though I was the broke person. I did not have any money. And I used my funds from a design retainer I had just sold for a project in Leland.
Did you discuss these concerns with Andrew?
Yes.
And how did he respond?
Stonewalling me. He was it was like maybe on one occasion he would say, like, he's fine. You know, he's okay. I talking to him, he was really behind on his schoolwork and it was so stressful. And, you know, like he wasn't empathetic to Leo about it. And it upset Leo even more, who called me, like FaceTime me at like 11 p.m. or 12 p.m. in Leland. It was like 9 p.m. his time. And the next morning I got on a plane. I drove to the airport and I got on standby and flew there because I was so worried about his mental health. And the numbers don't lie, you know.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, go ahead.
I interrupted you and I didn't even hear that. Can you say that again?
The numbers don't lie. I have spent a fortune, all of my savings, trying to see my children. Andrew has made so much money. At last count, it was $149,310 into a single joint bank account between August 1st and April 28th. He makes $90 an hour. He was padding his income in September, October, August, September, October, November by billing clients, double billing them so that he had extra money, and it all went to himself. There are no activities that the kids were in. They were not in therapy. Josephine is still not in therapy. He's contacted someone. She costs $320 an hour. I have asked for money for child out-of-pocket health expenses that we're supposed to be splitting 50-50, according to the divorce judgment that he wants entered. And it wasn't until April 28th when I got so fed up with waiting for months for this reimbursement, and I needed to finish paying Leo's private school tuition bill, that I went ahead and I withdrew the money from our joint account after he got paid $7,000. And then I ended up repaying him plus some. So I ended up lending him money and he's paid me back yesterday.
What was his reaction when you withdrew those funds?
His reaction to me was actually very measured. He just sent me an email that said, "Can you explain why you transacted $7,000? And I just wrote back, "This is our joint account and we're not supposed to even have this account anymore. And I don't know why you know, I don't think I wrote this, but it's basically like flaunt these huge deposits in my face and expect that I'm just going to sit around and take this when I am supporting our two children in Michigan without any support from you. You won't even pay back money that you owe to me for their health expenses in an agreement that you want upheld." I was angry for sure, but I also was like, you know, I also was just making a point because I withdrew that money and he couldn't pay his rent. So despite earning all this money, Andrew continues to live paycheck to paycheck with no savings to this day in Pasadena, which is one of the most expensive cities in the world, with a child in his care and private school tuition that he can't pay. And now we're all he's here arguing that we all should move back there and they should all go to private school, which is, as long as we have joint legal custody, the schools require both of us to sign enrollment contracts, which makes both of us legally liable for the cost of the tuition. As long as I have parental rights and I sign an enrollment contract for a private school in Pasadena, I'm legally obligated to pay that tuition as much as Andrew is obligated. This is so unfeasible. And I just don't understand why we can't just do what's right for our children and provide them with stable housing in a place that's affordable, that they are familiar with, in schools that are public, that are good enough. Maybe they're not the best schools in the world. They're good enough. And they have activities, they have therapy, you know, they have friends. We have a community that's wonderful. I have a business. Andrew works remotely. I don't even know why. I mean, it's so illogical. It's not in the children's best interests. Sorry.
You ended up providing therapy or setting up therapy for both Birdie, Uma, and Leo, correct?
Yes.
And you let Mr. Llewellyn know about that, correct?
Yes.
And did you ask him to contribute financially to the cost of that therapy?
Yes.
What was his response?
There was no response. He said, I think I'll think about it and get back to you. And then, of course, he did not get back to me.
Isn't it also true that he actually asked you to get them into therapy?
Yes, Andrews called Leo's school in January, or maybe, I think maybe it was early February, actually. And he said he wrote me an email saying, I'm very concerned about Leo and how he's doing, and he's watching Birdie too much. And, you know, I called the school to check on support for Leo. And I wrote back to him and I said, yeah, I agree. He needs more support. We are beginning therapy in a few weeks, and I'm hiring a nanny so that Birdie has more care because I work full time and Leo doesn't want to be around her after school. Would you like to contribute to these costs? It's not free. No response. No interest in who the therapist was, never asked me about it again, and only contacted her a few days before the beginning of this hearing on April 5th. And the first day of this hearing was on April 10th. And to this day, as far as I know, has never been in touch with her since.
How long did it take him to pay you 50% of the uninsured medical care?
Well, I just took it out of his account, out of that joint account that we have. And so I took it out of the account, and then he owed me like almost $2,800. And so we subtracted that from the $7,000, but then he still needed more money because he had to pay his rent. And so I just sent him his full rent amount, which then meant that he still owed me $450, which he just sent to me yesterday. And all of these expenses that were reimbursed by my taking that money out of the account do not include any therapy bills that are currently going on in May. So I'll have another invoice for him in a couple weeks that account for all of the therapy in May.
Has he ever offered to simply pay half of it as he goes or as you go?
No.
And when your daughter Josephine had emergency orthodontic surgery in the beginning of January of 2023, correct?
Correct.
And that was an unanticipated significant expense, correct?
It was $2,880, and it was totally a surprise.
And at that point, how were you doing financially?
Not great. You know, I had to borrow money from friends through the fall to like pay for plane tickets and fly back and forth. It was very humiliating. And I had recovered some by the around Christmas time. But you know, again, it's like I'm recovering. It wasn't like, and I just paid for Christmas, which Andrew did not contribute a dime. Actually, no, he didn't contribute to Christmas.
So at that point, would you agree with me that Andrew was making significantly more money than you?
Absolutely.
And did you ask him to help pay for this $2,800 emergency orthodontic bill?
I did.
And what was his response?
He sent me an email saying I'm unable to contribute. And her orthodontist surgery was on January 2nd. He had been in Napa, California with friends for Christmas on a luxury vacation, I assume. And then in his discovery, he reports that he had snorted cocaine on January 1st of 2023, the day before her emergency surgery, which I don't know how he paid for that drug.
So needless to say, despite making significantly more money than you and you being in financial dire straits, he refused to contribute anything to the orthodontist to allow the surgery to happen.
Yeah, yes.
After Leo and Uma Birdie moved back to Michigan in January, and as a preliminary matter, you and Mr. Llewellyn agreed to a stipulated order on January 11th, 2023, correct?
Correct.
And you were represented by counsel to negotiate that, correct?
Correct.
And so was he, correct?
Correct.
And that stipulated order provided that the two younger children would live primarily with you for the remainder of the school year, correct?
Correct.
And it also allowed for a parenting time schedule in both California and Michigan, correct?
Yes.
And since the entry of that order, how often has Mr. Llewellyn visited Leo and Birdie in Michigan?
Once.
When was that?
January 29th to February 7th.
And how often has he seen Leo or Birdie elsewhere other than Michigan?
Since that order was entered, Leo flew there for his spring break on March 24th, and I think he came back like 10 days later. But Andrew has not seen Birdie since February 7th. And she flew with me to Michigan on December 11th. So he's only spent about, 8 days or so with our youngest child, who's now 5. She turned 5 in April. He's only spent about 7 or 8 days, maybe eight days, I think, since December 11th. And she misses her dad.
How often did you visit the children in California in the fall?
I have to count on my hand. So I flew there in August. I flew there in September from the 8th to the 18th. I flew there from September 30th to October 8th. I flew there from October 27th to November 16th. So that's 4. And then they came back with me for Thanksgiving. And then I flew them back to California on November 25th. And then flew there again on December 8th until December 11th. And then we got the new interim order. And so then I flew back in January to do this house switch that we agreed to do. So that's 6 times to see all 3 children. And then 7 times, including that January trip. And then I was there in February to see Josephine and do that art thing. And so that's 8 total round trips.
Was that emotionally taxing for you?
Yes.
Was it financially difficult?
I think disastrous is a better word, but yes, difficult.
And why do you say that?
I just spent a fortune on plane tickets. Andrew at the beginning helped me, I think, with 1, maybe 2 plane tickets. Again, he makes a gigantic sum of money each month. And I had to rely on friends. My friend Charlie just bought plane tickets for me. And, I just paid him back when I could.
Did you have to borrow money from anyone else?
Yes, my friend Molly sent me $2,000 on October 27th so I could fly standby to see Leo and get there and have some money. I also happened to finally get a new project and I got a design retainer the same day. So I was able to pay her back immediately.
Did you have any savings after spending all of that money on travel?
No,
Did you have any credit cards to rely on?
no.
Did Mr. Llewellyn reach out to you with regard to the time that Leo was to spend in California for spring break, concerned about paying for it?
Yes, he did not buy Leo's ticket until the morning of the flight. And he kept telling Leo he was working on it, which is code for I'm waiting to get paid because I live paycheck to paycheck. And then 2 days, I think maybe 2 days before, he wrote to me and said, can you buy this plane ticket and I'll pay you back when I get paid? And I unfortunately had to say no, because I was not going to enable this constant financial mismanagement.
Did it surprise you that he didn't have enough money to even buy a plane ticket, given what he had earned and what you knew he was earning, since you had access to the joint account?
I wasn't surprised, which is very unfortunate.
Did it make any sense to you how he could have nothing?
No,
All those funds being paid?
to this day, it is a total mystery to me where Andrew spent $149,000 over the course of 8 months. He didn't even pay for Josephine's school tuition bill. He used her college funds and Leo's college funds to pay her freshman year tuition in Pasadena, and is now requesting from the court that all the children return there for private school. It is astonishing. And I I added up things in the bank statements. I mean, there's a very large amount of just lavish personal spending. But even that doesn't. And then, he himself has admitted that he spends $10,000 a month just on living expenses like rent and health insurance. And in December and January, he didn't even pay the children's health insurance premium. And he said to me, well, in December, I tried to pay it on the last day of the month, and there was a technical glitch and the payment didn't go through. So, but you had insurance for them in Michigan. So I decided not to pay it in January. And then I got a new premium in February. Well, in December, you spent a fortune on yourself and you went on vacation. Why did you wait till the last day of the month to pay the children's health insurance premium? And then in January, you couldn't contribute to her oral surgery, which would have gone to her insurance. I submitted it to my insurance, which didn't pay for it. I don't know where all the money went. Not towards our children, I can tell you that.
Are you aware of significant tax debts that are owed to the IRS in the state of Michigan?
I just saw that yesterday. He owes $44,000 in the year 2021 alone to the federal government, and he owes almost $9,000 to the state of Michigan alone for the year 2021. And he filed those taxes after I asked him for a 2021 return that I thought he filed together, and they weren't filed, they were rejected. And then I said, okay, I want my own tax return for that year. So he went ahead and filed separately. And then I just saw that, I don't know, what is that? $53,000 for a single year in tax debt for 2021.
Are you able and willing to pay for private school tuition for your 3 children if you need to move back to California to continue to care for them?
I have no financial way to pay for private school for our children in Pasadena or California or anywhere. I have a business in Michigan, and my business cannot be picked up and moved to California to pay for private school. I would have to get a full-time job, and the salary range that I'd be looking at is between $60,000 and $70,000 a year, which would, be like a 1-bedroom apartment in Pasadena and little else. Andrew pays almost $4,000 a month in rent. That's $48,000 in cash a year. After you pay taxes on a $65,000 salary, what does that leave you with? Like $50,000? I couldn't possibly afford anything with 3 bedrooms in Pasadena.
Have you looked at comparisons of the cost of living in Pasadena versus Traverse City, Michigan?
Yes.
And what have you concluded?
Pasadena, I think the comparison I looked at is 67% above the national average for cost of living. And Traverse City, I think, is 7% below the national average. It does not make any sense for Andrew to demand that all the children live in California when he can't afford it. He has no savings. He has $1,300 in a retirement account and lives paycheck to paycheck, earning hundreds of thousands of dollars in cash in a remote job. It's not in our children's best interests.
Do you believe that you would be able to go ahead and purchase your own home in the Pasadena area?
No,
Why not?
because the average sale price, I believe, is about $1.2 or $3 million for a single family home. Even if I was trying to buy a condo, it would be around $1 million. Any suggestion that I should sell the property here in order to live there? Well, Andrew would get half if I sold it before 2027. And so maybe that's what he wants, is to put so much financial pressure on me so that I end up selling, and then he would get half.
And if you got half, let's say you had $200,000 out of all of that, would you be able to purchase a home in Pasadena?
I mean,
Are you able to manage an $800,000 mortgage?
no. No. I don't have that kind of income to show for a mortgage broker. Like, I don't have the kind of income that would meet the standard of, basically, that's a jumbo loan. No,
And do you have a credit card in your own name now?
I don't.
And so you would need to build credit, correct, to be able to even qualify for such a mortgage. Is that true?
Yes,
To clarify, obviously you and Mr. Llewellyn tried cohabitating in California, and did it work?
no,
You were asked on cross-examination initially about whether essentially drinking something or using something called a painkiller while you were at the Riverside Inn. Do you remember that?
I do.
And what is that?
It's the name of a cocktail at the Riverside Inn.
Have you ever abused painkillers?
No,
Do you have any substance abuse issues?
no,
In the emails that I have reviewed, with regard to Pasadena, and actually I'll just pull it up. Give me 1 minute. Do you recognize this message?
yes.
Could you identify it for the court, please?
This is a letter that Andrew wrote to me on September 1st, 2022, after the kids were already in Pasadena. And he is writing me another placating letter where he says he's open to changes, and according to other documents I received, he was not. But he does write in here about Leland as an option to live in and the pros and cons. You know,
I'd like to show you the rest of this document just as an initial matter.
okay.
Is this a true and correct copy of the entire letter that was provided to you from Mr. Llewellyn?
Yes,
I move for this to be entered as Exhibit 68.
No objection.
Admitted.
In this email, or I'm sorry, this letter, he compares a number of different options. And he also examines Leland, Pasadena, or Ann Arbor as a variety of places that you all could live. Is that correct?
yes, he also includes North Carolina and New York City and Chagrin Falls, Ohio.
And he acknowledges in this letter that your work is in Leland and it's thriving, correct?
Correct.
And he also says that the kids know it and have good friends there. You see that?
Yes,
And that there's a nice community of people and that your family is established there and could have a future there, correct?
yes,
Do you agree with these things?
yes,
And he also says that he has no professional future there. Do you see that?
yes,
Since you've been married to Mr. Llewellyn, has he worked primarily as a copywriter as you described?
yes,
And has that been consistent for many years?
yes.
And
It's
is that what he continues to do?
yes,
And he works remotely in that capacity, correct?
Yes.
When he says that he has no professional future in Leland, how did you interpret that?
Hollywood is not in Michigan. He wants to work in entertainment, and that's fine. He can choose to work and live in California if that's what he wants to do. I don't think that's in the best interest for our children. It would be nice for us to all be able to just, this was something that I tried to talk about with Andrew repeatedly, was like, what about what's good for the kids? Like when we lived there, it was like, as I've said before, we all lived in service to his ambition. And we lived there from 2011 to 2020, sorry. And he never sold a screenplay or a TV pilot or anything. That's 9 years. And we struggled. So I don't see why he's still, why this is still something that our children need to be tied up in. And he had them out there from August until the end of the year, and Josephine is still there. And he still has not sold anything to my knowledge. And when they were out there, he was making huge sums of money and spending it on himself and still doesn't have any savings. I don't know I don't understand what his goal is anymore, other than just to continue to try and pursue the career that he wants and meet up with people for coffee to talk about, writing projects and networking. And that's fine. You can fly there and do that. When we moved to Leland in 2020, which we did together as a married couple and a family, he said that he would fly and to LA if that was if things came up that he wanted to go participate in. And since our cost of living was lower, we would have more money for him to do that.
He writes about one of the cons of Pasadena. The cons, of course, are big: the cost of school, the cost of living, which are almost prohibitive. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
He then asked you to change the divorce agreement with regard to the property settlement, correct?
Yes.
He then states to you, I brought many of my own problems into the marriage: mental and emotional health issues, an ongoingly unstable work life, a constant struggle to find peace and success with my work. It's all been a lot, too much, I guess. Would you agree with that?
Yes, unfortunately.
Are you trying to create a more stable financial life for yourself and your children?
Yes.
Are you willing to be flexible with Mr. Llewellyn to allow him to continue to pursue his dreams in California if that's what he wants to do?
Absolutely. Yes.
If you remain in Leland and continue to work in your business, are you able to support yourself independent of spousal support?
In Leland, yes.
Is it your understanding that Mr. Llewellyn would continue to earn the same money he earns now, even if he lived primarily in Leland?
Yes.
Are you willing to work with him in the event that he would prefer to live in Traverse City?
Yes.
Isn't it true that he presented to you a number of options about living in Traverse City?
Yes.
Are you willing to be flexible in terms of sharing transportation should he choose to move back here?
Yes. Absolutely. For our children, yes.
What do you believe to be in your children's best interest at this time?
Our children should all reside in Leland. And we can make individual choices about high school, whether it would be Leland or Traverse City West. Josephine will be driving in the fall, and so we could work out carpools and driving. I would work closely with Andrew to help navigate that. I think I think our youngest child, Birdie, should go to Leland for kindergarten because she has a lot of friends who are already in Leelanau. And I think it's a lovely, lovely community for young children to be together, and they would grow up together and it would be delightful for her. And, you know, they have long-term housing and activities. They have summer jobs this summer. I'm working on getting an agreement with my neighbor across the street who has a dock to put Andrew's Boston Whaler on it. And our kids could ride the boat to work and park in front of the library and go to the Merc where Leah will be working. And then Josephine works at the bookstore. My office is above the Harbor House, and Birdie's going to be with her nanny Tracy and also be attending Shady Trails Camp in Northport. And then for the school year, you know, we can work out an agreement. If the kids are the older kids are in Traverse City. I mean, I would do anything with Andrew. I think I've demonstrated that I would do anything to try and work things out. And the reason we're here is because we couldn't, because I felt that his demands were unreasonable and they were not in the best interest of our children. And the reason I came to court is because I am here to advocate for their rights, and they deserve to live in a stable environment with friendships, a nice community, good public schools. Their school enrollment won't be jeopardized because tuition payments are late. We could save for college, which is around the corner. You know, it's just like, and Josephine's going to be in 10th grade. Leo's going to 9th grade. Like, I just want to focus on their future, like go on college trips and think about what their future is going to be. And I'd like to do that with Andrew and have a reasonable way of raising our children that is affordable and positive and healthy, not moving around rentals. He doesn't have a lease past July 31st.
Thank you, Mrs. Call. I don't have any further questions.
Final questions, Ms. Belden?
Yeah, let's see. Aishwarya, you commented on you can't be away from your business in Leland. Is that correct?
That's correct.
In the fall, you spent some significant chunks of time away from it though, correct?
I didn't really have much business going on in the fall until October 27th when I signed a new project, and just construction started on December 15th. And I left my business in the hands of basically a contractor, and I worked with the clients as I was in California on plans for the house that we began after I returned with Birdie on December 11th, and construction began at that house on December 15th.
Okay.
I managed construction.
Okay. So you just said you didn't have much business going on in the fall, correct?
Between September, October, and between August, I would say September and the middle of August, I was waiting on hearing about this new project with those clients. And I did have to wrap up that giant project in Leland that I had done the previous year into the beginning of September.
You also testified that since Andrew has moved to Pasadena, you've learned to be financially responsible and timely pay your bills, correct?
Correct.
Where are things at with the property taxes right now?
I'm on a monthly payment plan for them.
And how much in arrears are you?
We have a 2021 bill that is, I think, $6,000. And I think the 2022 bill is around $3,000.
Okay. And you're caught up with the winter?
I haven't received any current taxes for 2023.
Okay. Have you asked Andrew to be loaned money from Andrew? Since he moved out to Pasadena?
In the fall, I think in October or in September, August, September, he loaned me money via plane tickets.
Okay.
And he paid for my health insurance, I think, for August. And I think that I owed him about $3,400 that was, via things he had paid for. And as far as I can remember, and including looking through bank statements, like, for example, on October 8th, when I was leaving Pasadena, I needed money and he sent me $250 on October 7th. And then I paid him back the following week when I got back to Leland via Venmo, and there are transactions for that.
Okay, so the money that you borrowed from him in the fall, I have that at $3,440 as of September 22nd. Have you paid that back?
I have not.
Okay. So, and I saw you referenced that was for health insurance, plane ticket. I also have car insurance and the High Point enrollment deposit, a deposit that you were covering. Is that correct?
That sounds right, yeah.
Okay, so $3,440 that you have not paid Andrew back yet for.
Right.
Okay.
I kind of forgot about that. He hasn't mentioned it to me for some time, so I think he was kind of pressing me for it in the fall, and I just didn't have the money, but I haven't actually heard any requests for it this calendar year since January.
Okay. Do you have any other, are all of your utilities up to date with payment? Are you behind on anything?
My rent in Northport is paid, utilities here are paid, my utilities at my house in Lake Leelanau are fully paid. My rent at my office is paid, the babysitter's paid, the therapists are paid. My contractors are paid via my business. I paid Charlie back for tickets.
So, previously you testified that you don't have homeowners insurance on the Lake Leelanau home. Is that still true?
Yes, I'm going to be getting homeowners insurance before we move back, though.
Okay.
I'm actually shopping around because it's really expensive.
And then, with respect to the rent, so in May you paid $2,800 for rent in Northport.
Right.
Plus you are maintaining the home in Lake Leelanau, correct?
Correct.
And you said that Andrew's rent in Pasadena is how much? $3,900?
It's $3,890.
Okay. Okay. And you're paying $2,800 for rent in Northport.
Only for the month of May. Previously, I paid $1,800 between November and April. And then when I go back to Lake Leelanau, the house there's no mortgage. So I'll only be paying property taxes, the homeowner's insurance and utilities.
Okay. And the home with no mortgage, you purchased that home for how much again?
I gave Andrew a property settlement of $25,000, which he agreed to.
Okay. But when you and Andrew purchased the home, you purchased it for?
$449,000, I think.
Okay. And so you gave Andrew $25,000 for his interest in that home, and the rest is yours. I know there's some terms about how much you will get if the home has to be sold before, what did you say? It was 2027, correct?
Andrew has a first right of offer, I think, in perpetuity. And then if it's sold before September 1st of 2027, he gets 50% And part of the property settlement, I waived spousal support, and also child support.
Okay, so that was all considered in that you would not take spousal support or child support in lieu of getting the primary asset of the marriage, correct? Well, I would argue the primary asset is your 3 beautiful children, I guess, but
Thank you.
the primary property asset is the home. You testified that in October of 2022, I think you and Andrew both acknowledged that there was that Leo seemed depressed, correct?
Yes.
Do you remember on October 7th, or that Andrew purchased you a plane ticket to come out to Pasadena to spend time with Leo?
On October 21st, Andrew sent me actually, I don't know if it was, but he bought me a plane ticket for the weekend of October 21st to October 24th. And the plane ticket was for the express purpose that he wanted to go to Malibu with his girlfriend, and he needed childcare for the weekend. And since Leo was depressed, I should go out there and spend the weekend with them. And of course, I wanted to do that, but I had a very important client meeting in Leland with the Chatfields on October 24th, after over a month of trying to negotiate their new design project. And I think I showed this during our presentation, I had minus $278 on the week of October 16th, 17th, 18th. I had 0 funds to my name to get on that plane to spend that weekend with the kids. And I also, actually, I think he bought me a ticket for the week, and then he wrote to me, I'll move it just for the weekend so you can babysit them. I really want to have a couple of nights to myself. I've been single parenting and it's been hard. I would, be great if you could be here. And I just said, I think I said to him, I need more time with Birdie. Can she come back with me? Because I have to start this project. And he just said no. And I said, well, I don't have money to get on. If I got off the plane, I don't even have an Uber car ride to Pasadena, let alone spending a weekend there. And you will have already left for Malibu for the weekend. And it just was so essentially what happened is I said, I can't come because I don't have any money and I have this meeting on the 24th. And so I went online and I changed the ticket to October 28th. And I went to my meeting on October 24th. He hired a babysitter that night, or his friend Barb Ray watched the kids. I called her and talked to her just to check in the kids on October 21st. He spent the night in Malibu, and then he came back the next day.
So Aishwarya, I just shared the screen. Can everyone see that? It shows on an October 19th posting that shows that Andrew with a card purchased a Delta flight, and the transaction date, which I think means it was the fly date, was October 17th. And that was for about $700. That was the ticket he purchased for you?
He bought the ticket on October 17th, and that transaction of 10/19, that date is when it cleared his account. So, but the actual transaction date was the 17th for the 21st, and I wasn't able to get on the plane because I didn't have enough money, and I had a client meeting on Monday morning. I sold the project, got a $12,000 plus deposited it on October 27th, and then got on a plane and flew standby to see Leo. The following day on October 28th, I took both Josephine and Leo to a therapist.
So I'm sorry. So this ticket that he purchased for the 17th, you said you used it for the 28th to fly out?
Yes, and that's part, I think, of that $3,400 that I owe him, maybe it's not, maybe it's
No,
more.
well, that email was from September and this was October. So I think that's separate.
Okay,
so
we
this
can
was
add that to my
another-
check.
Yeah, so this was another, so the October 28th ticket was that you
Actually, this ticket, yes.
was this ticket. Okay, so I think previously you said that you had your friend Molly give you $2,000 so you could purchase a ticket, but you didn't need a ticket, correct? Because you
No, I needed money. And
Okay.
so whether
Okay.
I needed money because my
Okay.
account was overdrawn.
Okay, I would move to have this admitted as an exhibit, and I don't have an exhibit number on here, but it would be, can we do A1?
Sure, no objection.
A1 is admitted.
Thank you. Um, Okay. Um. Would you agree that in the fall you were able to get out to see the kids? All the kids were living with Andrew, correct?
Yes,
So there was really no need for Andrew to be flying to northern Michigan because all the kids were with him.
that's correct.
Okay. And you also acknowledge that Andrew was there in northern Michigan, January 29th through February 7th. And then Leo was in Pasadena for his spring break for about 10 days, correct?
Yes,
You are aware that Andrew had a flight to be here or to be in northern Michigan for April for Bertie's birthday, and he was bringing Josephine with him. But then the flight was canceled, which like the morning of, which he was at the airport when it was canceled, correct?
yes,
So he had another flight that he was scheduled to be here, and it just didn't pan out because of a flight issue.
correct.
You also testified that you had no financial way to pay for private school right now, nor any financial way for you to live in Pasadena at this time. But you would acknowledge that you're sitting on a large asset in Lake Leelanau, or in Lake Leelanau, correct? A house that's valued at $450,000 at least, because that's what you purchased it for.
I would get half if I sold it and Andrew would get half before
Okay.
2027.
So if you sold it for 450,000, you could roughly net about 200, let's say, after, that would be on a low ball. To have those would be surplus funds that you could use any way you want, correct? There's no restrictions on the use of that money.
Yes, I would not choose to move to Pasadena with that money though.
Okay. You previously stated that you really didn't have to do any marketing or anything in order to have the career that you've set up that's really been only going on for maybe 18 months in Leland as an interior designer, correct?
Correct.
It's all been word of mouth. But yet you're saying if you were living in Pasadena, you would be lucky to have a salary where you would earn 60 to 70,000, correct?
Correct.
You don't think that via word of mouth, you could start up an interior design business in Pasadena?
The market in Pasadena is very different. It's saturated with designers everywhere. It means like everybody's a designer, everybody's a real estate agent, and everybody's got a screenplay to sell. That is how it is there. And in here in Leland, I kind of own the market, and it's just been really profitable and great. And I also have a growing business. I currently have 3 employees. I think I had 2 when I testified in April. I just added a 3rd employee, and I'm probably going to be adding a 4th one by the end of the summer. So there's no way for me to translate that to Pasadena in the short term. Of course, I'm a hard worker, and I would need to initially at least get a job for at least a year or 2, and I wouldn't be able to pay for private school or afford any kind of, decent home. And I think another financial sense thing is just like, if in the case I sold the house here on $200,000, like I would need to wisely invest that money. It would never go towards just keeping my bills afloat, just spending it.
So, Ishwari, you testified in from 2011 to 2020 while you were living in the LA Pasadena area that you were all living in service to Andrew's ambition for his career. Is that right?
Yes.
Can you outline to me though, when did you go to? You moved to the LA area what year?
2011.
Okay, so you moved there in 2011. And at that time you had left Chicago. What had been your profession in Chicago?
Before we got married, I had planned to go to medical school. And so I have an undergraduate degree and then was taking pre-med classes. And I worked, I think, for a year after Leo was born. We didn't have any money. Andrew quit his job when I was pregnant, and I started working at a hospital. And so for health insurance. And so I worked in medical stuff. But
Okay.
I didn't. And then when we moved to LA, I actually became a science writer for the Children's Hospital immediately. And our children were in preschool, and I worked at the Children's Hospital Los Angeles in the marketing department. And I translated essentially scientific papers into press releases so that they could announce new research that was coming out of the hospital. And I had that job for a little bit. And then I actually sold an article to Scientific American, which is a magazine. And when I sold that article, Andrew said to me, "Wow, that's great. Just as long as you're not more successful than me." And I did some freelance journalism in science writing. And then, I'm sorry, is this the question?
Yeah, so I guess my next question is, when did you go to design school?
I went to design school in 2014. Actually, let me think. Yeah, in the fall of 2014.
And how did you pay for that?
Andrew paid for my tuition, and I only did about half the program. There were 20 classes, and I took, I think, 8, 9, maybe 10 classes over the course of a year and a half. And I did it while the kids were at school during the day. And then I had 2 internships.
Mm-hmm. Were they paid internships?
Yes.
Okay. So is it fair to say that you were advancing your career path as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely not comparable. I wasn't quitting jobs and losing jobs and driving all over and making reckless financial decisions in an effort to sell something that never sold. I now have a design career. Andrew does not have a writing career that he wants.
Okay. You mentioned that you felt Andrew wasn't approving of your relationship with your friends in Leland. You previously testified you were actively having an affair and keeping it hidden from Andrew during that time as well, though, correct?
It wasn't during that time. I had an 8-week relationship with somebody after Andrew moved to California for the first time for a separation, and it was a secret for a long time. And no, those friends did not know about that until much later on.
Okay. And were you drinking a lot with those friends?
No,
Who was watching the kids while you were out with those friends at night?
they were with me again, as I testified. We didn't do a lot of going out. It's Leland, it's winter, it's, if I went out in the summertime, like my kids would maybe be at home with Andrew or, like out with their own friends. My children also have a large social life. But I never left them in any kind of excessive manner to go drinking. That's not
Okay.
correct.
Okay. Okay, I have no further questions.
All right, thank you. Let's go off the record briefly here.